But I really don't have any regrets. I really don't. I've lived exactly how I've wanted to. I've tried my hardest every single time. I didn't win the matches that maybe I should have always won, but I really gave it my all. So that for me is enough.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Body Serve. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm James. You don't know where to start.
I don't know where to start.
Well, let's start with, for the first time since the late 90s, Roger Federer is no longer an active tennis player.
This mere weeks after Serena Williams bowed out of her tennis career.
Yes. I refuse to group them together. I want to give each their due. So it's the last time we're going to mention her.
Right, but it's a fact of the matter.
It is.
It contributes to the enormity of the moment. These are two towering figures. Arguably, depending on which side of the fence you sit on, the two most towering figures in the history of men's and women's tennis ever.
Perhaps. They're up there. I think it has a lot of fans thinking about mortality and seasons changing, and for me, they were my first generation of tennis.
Are you saying you didn't know men's tennis before Roger Federer?
A few years before. I got into women's tennis first, but I wasn't really, I didn't watch during Sampras and Courier, and then Rafter, Kafelnikov, all that. I didn't really know that.
I know you were tuning into Andy-Roddick matches. I just know you were.
Yeah, in the early 2000s I was.
Okay.
But, Roger is part of that generation, the Andy-Roddick generation. It's just remarkable that he's been around this long.
This episode is going to have a heavy tilt towards Federer and celebrating his career and his achievements and giving our lifelong personal experiences of watching his career. And it's going to be a heavier treatment than what we gave Serena's evolution. And that's only because we are saving something hopefully special for Serena at a later date.
An entire standalone episode. For Roger, I think for a lot of his career, we've had varying feelings. Like there was ambivalence, there was dislike for a while. Being Rafa fans.
I'm going to state here, to be transparent, that it started for me with absolute disdain.
Well, you tend to go there, right? Like you have very heightened emotions, and you raise to that level maybe a little bit too quickly.
Listen, I was an Agassi fan, and what Federer did to him in 04 and 05, in taking away those last glory moments, I was disgusted. Yeah. And then, given that I have a propensity to root for underdogs, when Federer ran away with tennis from 04 onwards, it was bleak for me as a tennis fan.
Right. Now, Nadal asserted himself quickly.
Mm-hmm.
He started challenging at the French right away, won a bunch of hardcourt titles, but my point here is that Agassi in 05, for example, in the US Open final, he wasn't expected to win. He got a set, and that felt like a titanic achievement. And Agassi said that it wasn't like playing Sampras. It wasn't like playing anyone he had played before. This guy is different. And in the beginning of Federer's slam-winning career, it seemed like it was so soon that people started saying, this guy could be the greatest. By the time it was 05, people were saying, this man is a genius, he's going to be the GOAT, and it's incredible how quickly that chorus started.
And in that chorus, the discourse was this business of the class of Federer, the classiness of Federer. And that 1-2 step of beating my previous fave and then transitioning into being the classiest tennis player, impregnable character that ever lived, that was too much for me. And we see it again today. We saw it throughout the entirety of his career. Even with the rise of Nadal, they necessarily cast Nadal as the brute force opponent who didn't win with intelligence, but needed to be cast in that opposite light because Federer so squarely occupied that lane.
Right.
And so we hear things that, well, Federer announced his retirement after the US Open so that Serena could have her shine. And wow, how classy. Like every turn, everything that Federer does or did, it had to be classified in that way. And I think part of my initial aversion to him and my lifelong thinking through my own tennis fandom and its relationship to Federer is sifting through that and what that means specifically with the ethos of this show, right? That we view tennis through a sociopolitical lens, right? How does that affect other people? How does that reflect the world outside of tennis? And in a large sense, it's completely out of his control, but it's instructive for us to address it to make sense of the world that we live in.
Okay. Now, a few years ago, I think we...
Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because I want to see where we're going with this. A few years ago, we talked about basically the reasons why we were never stand. And I think we lost like a bunch of listeners. I'm being dead serious here. Like people literally unfollowed us right after that episode. And I don't want to go hard. Like I don't want to relive that. Roger is someone who I've grown to appreciate so much, but it was difficult early on. That just wasn't the player that I responded to. Like the perfection, the sort of the harping on the grace and elegance, and he was like the apotheosis of Wimbledon whites. I just, it wasn't something that moved me personally. And so I've definitely moved past, like now I just realize that wasn't for me.
Right, but also the downside of that is that we went a decade without really being able to appreciate his legitimate genius fully.
And you know, I remember watching those Wimbledon finals, especially the '08 final, and of course I wanted Rafa to win, but I just loved it. I mean, I didn't want it to end. It was amazing. I never begrudged Roger for winning those Wimbledon finals against Rafa. It always felt like Rafa was building on something, like he was going to get there.
That was not my experience.
Okay.
I was very bitter about it.
Fair enough. But to me, Roger got so much more interesting when he was no longer peerless. Of course, there was always Nadal keeping him from the French Open title, which he eventually won in 2009, winning his first Channel Slam, which, by the way, used to be rare. Mm-hmm. And now we have 3 players who've all done the Channel Slam, some multiple times.
You said peerless, but I think more interesting is that he became more relatable and interesting to me when he became flawed, when he was no longer flawless.
When he let his temper out.
Sure, when holes were poked in that facade of imperious class and perfection. Because
I think for you, there's also a colonial perspective on this.
Absolutely,
right? Like
yes.
Wimbledon class and sort of the perfect example of what a Wimbledon club member should be. Like the country club thing just never appealed to me personally. And what got sanded down so frequently was the hard work behind the scenes, training in UAE in incredible heat, just the years and years and years it took to make this look so easy. He made it look so easy, which is why it's amazing, why it's beautiful to look at. But it's so much more interesting than that. And I think John Wertheim did a good job in Strokes of Genius at sort of breaking down that binary between him and other players, specifically Rafa in that case.
I sit here and I decry the comparison between Nadal and Federer, whereby Federer is cast as effortless genius, having everything come to him so naturally, the preternatural prodigy, right? And then Nadal is necessarily cast, in part because of his muscles and his style of play, as the complete opposite of that, right? That Nadal, has to work so hard because he doesn't have those natural gifts. But that argument, that binary, does such a disservice to both players. Mm-hmm. Nadal, specifically in that his game and he is viewed as not being super smart. And then for Federer, as you said, the hard work that he had to put into his game throughout the decades of his career to get where he did, that is nowhere near given the credit that it's due.
You wanted to talk about the title of this episode. It doesn't even matter. We weren't talking about Federer's retirement because, of course, that matters. What were you trying to get at?
Specifically sitting and watching Laver Cup this past week, which is where Federer played his last event. And you got to see Federer interacting with Nadal, Federer interacting with Djokovic, with Murray, all four, the supposed big four, having a blast to varying degrees in their own specific interpersonal relationships. But everybody was there to have a great time, had a great time, was able to celebrate Federer and have it look as authentic as it probably was. And that just struck me because we've presided over this podcast for almost 8 full seasons, been tennis fans for over 20 years each, and we've seen the development of the GOAT Wars, of fandom as a disease, as you put it, about how nothing can be said about one without folks taking it to mean a negative strike against the other. That at every turn, when talking about men's tennis over the last 20 years, that it's fraught, that it's a hostile environment. The discourse is hostile. And in that moment of watching Laver Cup, I was struck by how all that I personally lived through doesn't matter to these guys, by and large. I suppose you could sit here and make an argument that, okay, fine, Novak really still does feel a way about not being as loved as all the others, or doesn't get the glow that he deserves, even though he may be the greatest, you know? But by and large, these guys were not giving what you all and we have given in the past to the discourse surrounding these four guys.
Yeah. And we've participated in this as well. It's not like we're innocent of these kind of stan wars, but stan culture has really invaded tennis as well, right? And like you said, any positive thing you say about a player is conceived as a negative about everybody else. Novak looked really moved by the whole retirement. Like, everybody was getting along. They might not be as close as they once were, or, things have been said where everybody feels a little bit sore about it, but it's not that serious.
No. And okay, fine, Roger and Rafa may have a much closer relationship than Roger and Novak.
Right. And
so what?
And Andy and Novak are probably closer than they are to the other two. And these are normal things.
It was just a sense of what a waste of time.
Right.
Over all these years to have spent so much energy in participating in and watching this all unfold. When at the end, everybody's here understanding the magnitude and the actual gravity of the moment and what this career has been. And it led me to self-reflect on my own failure and shortcomings in that regard, in not allowing myself to be fully present for the ride, to really understand the greatness that we all had a front seat to watching for the last 20 years. And it's not relegated to just the big four or just men's tennis. So much has happened in women's tennis with the Williams sisters as well. We can't get into that on this episode because that's a podcast series. But we all have not allowed ourselves to be fully immersed in the experience that was on offer.
Yeah, I think that we have made ourselves create an enemy. And I'm the same way, right? Like, if somebody is winning who I don't want to win, I can no longer enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I got to work on that.
Listen, back in the mid-2000s when Federer was in his imperial phase, when he lost that 2008 French Open final to Nadal, I still get yearly reminders from Facebook of what I did. And I made a Microsoft, Paint? A Microsoft Paint image where I drew in multicolors with my finger, Federer sucks. And I posted it on my friend's Facebook wall. Because he is
rude.
A huge Federer fan.
We were young then.
And full circle, he and I just sat and watched Nadal play at the US Open this year. It was his very first live tennis experience.
Wow. So let's talk about that period, as you called it, the imperial phase. And what jumps out, I don't want to talk about stats too much, but I think the stat that really kills me, that puts Roger at the tip top of men's tennis history, is 10 slam finals in a row.
Why does it kill you?
And then a very brief dip and then 8 more slam finals in a row, all within a few years of each other. That is such it kills me because it's like it's hard to wrap your head around. And if you did not live through that, watching Roger go through maybe 04 to 08, 09, he felt unbeatable. It felt like this reign would never end.
And unfortunately for him, the only thing that stopped him really from really making that era impregnable was Nadal at the French.
Mm-hmm. Roger was by far the second best player on clay for a good probably 4 or 5 years.
Without Nadal, he possibly could have won 8 straight in a row. Well, that's a lie. 10 straight in a row. And that would have included 2 calendar year Grand Slams. Like, that's crazy.
Right, and these are all conditional and anything could have happened. But the level of his dominance was really hard to wrap your head around at the time. And the thing is that now we've seen others do it. Right? We've seen Djokovic reach that level of dominance and possibly surpass it. At the time, it just felt so impossible that somebody could do this. Remember that Roger was the first one to pass Pete Sampras's 14 slams, which for a very brief period, and this is legend at this point, that felt like an unbeatable record. And it was beaten within, 10 years? It didn't take that long.
No, it was done and dusted by 2009.
Oh my God. Okay, so that was 2002 is when Pete set that record. Yeah. The 8 Wimbledons, the stretch of 5 US Opens and 5 Wimbledons in a row, these are legend-making stats. But I think what fans really respond to is just the way that Roger played tennis. To me, he seemed to love tennis more than most great champions. Like, he actually looked like he was enjoying himself. And for so many champions at that level, it feels a bit tortured.
What are some of your most enduring Federer memories?
Well, let me be nice and pick a match that he won.
Okay.
The, what was it? The 09 Wimbledon final against Andy Roddick, which is a classic. I was rooting for Andy. He had been in so many finals at that point. And it showed you like how impregnable he was on that surface. Reminded you that Roger could be a serve bot. He's number 3 in the all-time list of aces.
Right.
But he had everything
But
else.
it's different. His serve wasn't overpowering, per se, in terms of sheer speed, but it was overpowering in its placement and spins.
Yes.
And variety. And that's where the argument can be made that he's the greatest server that ever lived on the men's side, because he could do everything with his serve. Mm-hmm. To think that this man accomplished so much with that backhand. I know this may be heresy, right? Like,
a lot of people love the backhand.
no, the backhand, it's beautiful to look at. It's done great things, but in other spots, it's been great gowns, beautiful gowns.
Well, it's been exploited very clearly by Nadal.
It's a fact of tennis history that a one-handed backhand is more exploitable than a two-handed backhand. Like, that's not up for debate.
I mean, I'm a one-handed backhand skeptic.
Right, and my point is it moves beyond just the aesthetics of it. It's just because it's gorgeous doesn't mean it's great.
Well, it could be very effective.
Yes.
And he could hit tons of winners off it.
Yes.
But some players really knew how to pick at it.
Right, and I'm saying the great sum of other parts of his game made that not even a factor for most of his career.
Right. I mean, you
could just sit there and look at it and be like, oh my God, amazing. Without even having to actually consider that this actually could be a little bit of a liability in his game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But what about you? What's a memory? It's
not so much one specific memory, but a collective memory of him coming back from a fairly barren period between 2010 and 2017. He won the Australian Open in 2010, and then the only other slam he won before Australia in 2017 was Wimbledon in 2012. And for all the dominating that he did up until that point, that is a long, long period to be, making semifinals, making quarterfinals, not being able to get over the hump. And it was during that period, and I think the same can be said for you, that we started to appreciate him more.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
To be able to pay attention to what he does on a tennis court and understand the greatness in his game. And then to see him come back in 2017 and start to have success again at that late stage of his career, that is a memory that I will always have of Federer. A positive one. Because I cannot say that a lot of the early career Federer memories are positive for me.
I mean,
even the 2017 final, like, I can't be mad about it.
In Australia, yeah.
I cannot be mad about it because that was incredible stuff that he unleashed on Rafa in that fifth set.
Beating Rafa from a breakdown in the fifth set, then going on to repeat his Australian Open title in 2018.
One more thing, and it's not a specific memory again. One of the things that I grew to really appreciate about Federer was how much of a dork he is.
Yes.
His dad jokes and how he cracks himself up over the most ridiculous things. I appreciate that.
Yeah, like back in the day of the Wimbledon Blazer, I didn't know that he was funny, right? I thought he was a little bit stuffy. And I didn't realize he was corny and he liked to joke around with the guys in the locker room and that everybody really liked him. I mean, he never felt like unlikable, but I just didn't realize he was kind of cheesy, which is endearing. Roger announced his retirement about a week before Laver Cup on September 15th. It was a social media push. He recorded a video, and it was fatalistic, right? It was sad. He realized that his knee wasn't getting better. Training had sort of reached a plateau, and he understood that he wouldn't be able to return to competitive tennis.
And he said that I'm going to Laver Cup, but it's still not a guarantee that I'm going to play.
Right.
I hope to maybe play doubles. And at that point, folks are like, well, that has to be with Rafa.
Indeed. And we found out at the Laver Cup that Roger had told Rafa about 10 days before his public announcement that this was coming. And he asked if Rafa would come to Laver Cup, essentially for him. And Rafa had no plans to go to Laver Cup. He was going to go home. Apparently, he had re-aggravated the ab injury at the U.S. Open.
Well, he had previously committed, but in light of subsequent developments with his body and with his family, he changed his mind.
Right. Mary is pretty late in her pregnancy. There had been reports about hospitalization, and we don't really know fully what's going on. But it seemed like he needed to be at home. And he wasn't fully fit, and you could tell based on the way he was serving at Laver Cup. But that and the way that those two interacted and touched and emoted together, like you can tell there's a really unique bond between them.
Well, Rafa said, let me know for sure that you're going, and then I will come for as long as I can, if I can at all. Mm-hmm. But I need to know that you're going first.
We are not a Laver Cup podcast. Never personally have really gotten into the event. Watch it here and there, just out of full transparency.
We've only watched it for Fedal, to
basically,
be clear.
Yeah. I realized why it doesn't appeal to me. And it's because I'm not looking for teams. Like, I'm not looking for team events in tennis. It's not something that interests me. Mm-hmm. And I don't like the frat boy behavior we see on the side. Some of it is interesting, right? Like when players are really engaged and they're sort of coaching each other. I don't like the frat boy shit.
When Federer and Nadal are single-handedly dismantling toxic masculinity.
Right.
On the bench in the retirement ceremony. Okay, I'm here for that. But as you said, and I think you know this about me, and this has been documented over time, that stuff, the bro frat boy, yo man, like that shit it's repulsive to me.
I know this, yes. And I get it.
As somebody who's played team sport.
Right. And also, I think we need to be honest about the stakes here. Right? There are no stakes. Does anybody care who wins?
Oh, but they do.
Well, sure, but why?
They care, absolutely. Like, how dare? How dare Frances Tiafoe?
Right, but what I want to know is why does anyone care if Team World or Team Europe wins? Like, these are fake creations. Like, this is not like a historic, like South Africa versus Great Britain in Davis Cup. Like, it's made up. And Team World is just a collection of people from Anglophone countries and maybe one South American. It's basically Europe versus the British Commonwealth plus Diego Schwartzman. That's it. Like, what? I just don't know, like, where did the stakes come from? Where does the...
But if Team World didn't win this one, then John McEnroe's job might have been on the line. And Patrick McEnroe might have lost his vice presidency job.
Stop. Wow. Life is good, right? I mean, to finesse your way into that, too. I don't get it.
No, you're right. The whole thing is made up. And we got force-fed this idea that Laver Cup is trying to rebrand itself and make itself more accessible to the youth. Because the average tennis viewer is 92.73 years old. And
I did finally find where these stats come from. Because a lot of leaders in tennis like to use this stat, like the average tennis viewer is 61 years old.
It must come from TV ratings, right?
Yeah, it comes from Sports Business Journal. It apparently was using like cable TV ratings, which is very misleading because a lot of young fans get their tennis elsewhere.
It's complete garbage because young people do not have cable.
Right, and it's also difficult to find tennis on cable. Right.
We are not young and we do not have cable. Like, the cable days are done. And also, having been to tournaments, it's not an average of 60-something years old.
No,
it is
not at all. Not at all.
So we need to be more transparent with this. Because in one breath, you can't be saying, oh, well, we need to appeal to young people, but then sell tickets for the top, right? The people, the people who have enormous 401ks. It just doesn't add up.
I think we need to be honest here that, so they're doing interesting things with social media, for example. Like they're trying to reach people in different ways.
By blocking people who talk about Alexander Zverev?
Right, when they're not blocking people. But, you know, Tony Godsick can tell us that they're trying to expand the appeal of tennis. But what he should also tell us is we do not care if young people actually come to the event. We are going to price the event however we want. And people are still going to buy the tickets. It prices people out, of course. I mean, millennials and Gen Zs, we're not buying $3,000 tickets.
Also,
we're not buying houses. We're not buying anything.
Also, where are these events being held? Are we just going back and forth between the O2 Arena and somewhere in North America?
Yeah, we got London, we've got Geneva, we've got the US. Come on,
Boston.
Guys. Come on. Like
Vancouver.
Anyway, this is not to say, like, anybody can love Laver Cup. That's allowed, right? This is not a cancellation. I just finally acknowledge why I personally am not on board. But if you like it, like, good for you. That's awesome.
Right.
It's just not for me.
I just know that after day one, I was out. It was over for me. The tournament was done.
Okay, so this year there was no Zverev. There was no John Isner. Let's celebrate that, as Oprah said. It felt good. You know, the Big Four was together for the very first time at Laver Cup. Team Europe was leaning hard on sentimentality. I'm so sorry to say. They did not send their best.
Right, but they also had injured players.
They had old, ancient players. Some of the GOATs, but...
Right, but for this moment, they had to be there.
They did, of course. And that's why I'm saying, like, who cares? Who cares if Team Europe lost? You got to see the Big Four together. You got to see Fedal play doubles and Roger retire.
You got to see a tour de force performance from Ellie Goulding.
Stop. We're almost there. Almost there. We got to see big strides being made by Felix and Frances.
See, I'm not even going to go there.
Oh, you don't think it's real?
I don't think it's real at all.
Okay, all right.
I don't think it's real.
You don't think these are real matches?
No, at all.
Come on. Felix had a good few weeks, though, between Davis Cup and Laver Cup.
But this has nothing on beating Novak, staring him down in a semifinal or a final of a slam.
No, of course
Absolutely nothing. Best of 5. Like, you just need to win one set and then you can get into a super tiebreak and see where it goes from there. Sure, he beat Novak in straight sets, but a couple cute results, but I'm not gonna come here and say, well, this means that Felix has arrived. Felix is making incremental progress.
Okay.
And has had some head-scratching losses, and he's also had some good wins. I want to see more.
Well, Frances Tiafoe and Jack Sock beat Fedal, as you know, ushered Roger into retirement. Frances also beat Stefanos Tsitsipas to clinch the win for Team World. Of course, his attitude, I guess, was met with just an incredible rush of horrible racist abuse on Instagram, which is to be expected.
It's so predictable, right?
It is.
That Frances is palatable and someone that can be enjoyed just as long as you know your place. Insert whatever you want to insert there.
Yeah. When he's not challenging the best players for big titles, he's not threatening. You can treat him like a clown. When he's a clown, he's entertaining. But when he's winning, you all of a sudden don't like the same stuff he was doing before, but now he's winning. And there's always some respectability argument, right? That, oh, you shouldn't be doing this at this time. It's disrespectful.
And this is where the class and the classiness comes in, right? Every time I hear that word, I cringe. Because Federer is classy, but Serena is not. But Venus is classy, but mostly only in relation to Serena.
Right.
And
so,
what does that say?
Like, there's this whooshing sound, and that sound is tennis Twitter finding another black player to use as a prop to prove that they're not racist. It's always that.
It was
right?
Naomi for
it's
a
like,
while.
Well, why can't you act like Coco on court? Oh, but then Coco got political.
Why can't Serena act like Venus? Why can't Serena act like Naomi? Oh, but we don't like Naomi anymore.
Oh, no.
We don't like Naomi
But not Naomi anymore.
Not her anymore.
So we have to find another black player.
And Coco is great. Coco is amazing. But she's getting a little bit too big for her britches.
And let's just call it what it is. Uppity. Uppity, which is an incredibly loaded racist term in the United States. You may not know that if you're not from North America. But what I'm seeing on social media is this rush, and it's the same people, those of whom I haven't blocked yet, the same people who said the same things during the 2018 US Open final. Right? It's like, this makes me uncomfortable. I don't like this. It's like, okay, I just said that I don't like the frat boy shit, right? I wasn't a huge fan of it. But I'm not going to boil that down to like, oh, he's terrible. I hate the way he acts. You can't celebrate it in one instance and then be like, oh, this is gross.
Oh, Frances, he almost decapitated both Federer and Nadal.
Right, and then like...
Federer didn't care, so why should I?
Federer waved off the crowd to tell them not to boo. And like, I just don't get it. They keep trying to convince us this is a real event and the players should care, but Frances cared too much. And that was distasteful because he wanted to win the match. Do you think that Roger wants to go out there and have somebody lay down their sword and let him beat them? No, I don't think so. I really don't.
The receipts on this podcast have been bountiful with us saying that you should attack your opponent.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So this is not hypocrisy, folks, from our part. We've been hypocritical many times before.
Go through my Twitter.
I mean, how many times have I been watching a tennis match and there's an easy ball at net and I jump from my seat and I'm like, finish him!
Even in the 07 Australian final, when Maria hit an overhead like right at Serena, and Serena mouthed something bad, I was like, girl, she did the right thing. Maria was supposed to do that.
And how many times, and Frances did this at the US Open, all y'all with short memories, Frances did this at the US Open where he should have gone at the net, at the player, and he patty caked all over the court and lost points he should have won.
He hiccuped. He didn't go for the kill.
And one of the knocks against Frances is that he's not serious enough. That he doesn't have the killer instinct.
Right. So now that he's too serious at this exhibition event, now he's acting like an asshole.
But he tried to fell the classiest of the gods.
The thing is, a black male player will never be able to win. Right?
Black player, period.
Right. But since Arthur Ashe, we haven't had a dominant black male player. And we historically have to sand down Arthur Ashe to fit an ideal that tennis will accept. Frances is brash. He's a lot, right? Like, he has a huge personality. And I want him to win, but I'm afraid of what he'll have to endure if he reaches that stage. So, I mean, obviously, like, I want the most for him. I want him to win slams. It sucks that we always have to talk about this.
And then we get I don't like Frances anymore. I wish she'd be more like Felix.
Oh, there we go, right? There is the prop. There is the proof. The proof that you're not racist.
But also the shift to the respectability. Mm-hmm. I just want to add one more reflection on Federer's game specifically. You know, back in the day, it was a part of my life. It sent me to the prom with my curling skirt on, even if I did drive myself.
Oh my God. I know what this is.
For those who know, they know. But part of me sitting here and ruining the fact that I did not fully engage with and appreciate Federer's greatness back in the day is coming here now and declaring that this man was a genius. Like, you mentioned his footwork, the way he glided across a tennis court. For me, it was the ridiculous shots he would come up with that were a result of his impeccable feel. Do you remember back in the day when Agassi would play, and the thing that folks would talk about all the time with Agassi was his hand-eye coordination, his half volley that he would hit from the baseline? Mm-hmm. Federer had that in spades and more. Like, he could do ridiculous flicks, little wrist shots, create these outrageous angles, win points from impossible positions just because the ball felt so much different to him than everybody else off of his tennis racket.
Mm-hmm. And part of that was audacity.
Yes.
Just the absurdity of attempting these shots. And that's why I feel he loved playing the game so much. That's where it came out, right? Like, why would you even try these?
And in trying those, he was able to achieve them while looking like he was giving a tenth of the effort that somebody else would.
Right.
When he stretched all the way on the forehand side, looking like he's about to lose a point, and he just sticks his racket out and hits a blistering down the line winner. It's like, how? How do you beat this man?
Right. And Andy Roddick was really, I think, the player who...
Are you about to say he's the player who suffered most at the hands of Federer?
To me, he's like the example, right? He's the casualty of the Federer era. The player who I think of when I think of like someone throwing up their hand saying, what can I do? Like, I have tried everything. Now, this was actually supposed to be a mailbag episode. I don't know if we'll get there. We'll see. We might answer a few. I was excited to talk about the mail. Mm-hmm. But, you know, we're going with the flow here. We got to talk about this retirement ceremony. Because what the hell was that? What?
Listen,
Honestly, it was too good. It was simply too good.
So Ellie Goulding...
Is it Goulding? Goulding?
What is it? Ellie. Miss Ellie.
Yeah.
She comes out and she sings two songs. One of them is Burn. You're going to say Burn, 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 and you Burn, gotta Burn.
Bang, bang, bang.
And I'm sure there'll be some Federer fan out there who will reach out and say, how dare you not know that in 2014, right, Federer let us know that Charlotte was a huge fan of Ellie.
Like, is there some connection that I don't know?
That she's been to dinner in Switzerland many times.
Is there some kind of connection there that I'm not getting? Like, why was it her? Not that, no disrespect to Miss Goulding.
Was everybody else unavailable because of the Global Citizens concert?
Sam Smith? I mean...
No, we don't need that.
Adele would be a big get, but like...
Not Sam Smith.
Was Dame Shirley Bassey not around?
Though Sam Smith would have captured the somberness of the moment. Because that is one thing he is very good at. Sucking the life and joy out of any song. Like what he did to Miss Whitney.
Like, was Tom Jones not available? Maybe one of the remaining Beatles? The hologram of ABBA, perhaps? Celine Dion won Eurovision for Switzerland. Did you know this?
Yes, I did know that.
Way back.
I did know that.
It could have been Celine. It was such an odd choice. And the videos of Roger and Rafa literally sobbing with the background of Ellie's second song. Why were there two? It was absurd. Like, it was actually kind of funny. I will say that Jim Courier did an excellent job with the post-match interview. And he mentioned on Twitter, like, my job is to be invisible, right? Like, you're not supposed to remember the questions he asked or anything. He let Roger kind of live in that moment. And it was very emotional, especially when he talked about his family. Ooh, Don't get me going. But
when he and Mirka embraced and kissed each other on the cheek back and forth repeatedly for like 2 minutes.
Right? And what he said about her, that is a man who knows that he has a good woman next to him. That she's the glue that holds the family together. And that he acknowledged that she allowed him to keep playing. And implied that if she was done, then he would have stopped a long time ago. Because think of the things that she's had to sacrifice to keep this career going. They've got 4 kids. He's traveling around the world. So I really appreciated that. And man, those two are in love. I thought the older twins, the girls, I thought they were like 7.
I think everybody was a bit shocked by how grown they are.
I don't remember when they were born, but I'm like, those are tweens. How did this happen?
You said to me those are mini Mirkas.
Yes, they really are.
So I looked it up because Google is free. The twin girls were born in...
I don't know, 2010?
2009.
What?
And the twin boys were born in...
Come
on, man, play along.
I don't care.
Play along.
2013.
2014.
Okay.
So depending on the birthdays, they're 13 and 8.
Yeah. Well, I was shocked. I thought the girls were little. But of course, what everyone was talking about was Roger and Rafa's embrace, their genuine physical affection toward each other, which is so refreshing. You know, Roger, you noticed, touched his leg. They were holding hands on the bench.
Well, he reached for his leg for support as he was bawling, and then shifted it to holding his hand. And then they were both crying on the bench.
I mean, you have to love it.
No.
What?
We say this all the time, that you can't tell people you have to love something.
Oh, that's true. You don't have to love this. I'll backtrack this.
But we love the hell out of it.
Yes. I love to see men showing real affection toward each other that's not like hand slapping, butt slapping, like aggressive masculine sports stuff. Like this it just was different. It was nice.
It met the moment.
It did. And it is kind of jarring to see somebody show that much genuine emotion in public, to actually be like bawling, right? It's not a single tear.
We know that they're historic rivals. We also know that they are friends. We didn't know, I don't think, the extent to which that cut so deep and the ways that intertwined for the both of them. To the point where Rafa said recently that back in 2009, he initially did not want Roger to win the French Open. He was like, there were some considerations there for me to get to number 1. But once Roger won the French Open, he found himself crying at the achievement. And he said at this event at Laver Cup, Miss Ellie calls it Laver Cup.
No.
That they had this huge emotional moment on the bench after the match. And they carried on and they did the requisite press engagements. And he went back to his hotel room and he cried again.
Mm-hmm. And we know Rafa is a sensitive individual. That's how he identifies himself. But the two clearly have a deep connection, and it's not surprising. Even rivals who hate each other have this deep connection, that they're a part of each other. Even John McEnroe and Bjorn Borg are at a place where they're collegial. They're buddies. They're captains together.
Martina and Chrissy, though it had its ebbs and flows, by and large was a very cordial, if not super friendly rivalry, and that's arguably the greatest ever.
And now it's like a true friendship. I think Magic Johnson and Larry Bird are a similar example.
I cannot speak to that.
But
I don't know why you're going out of your wheelhouse now.
Well, I figured you would know. The point is, like, those deep and lasting friendships happen sometimes among rivals, but I wouldn't say it's like the standard case. Mm-hmm. But you both have experienced something profound with each other over a period of years. You've pushed each other. You probably wouldn't be the player that you are without the other person.
You've shared your greatest victories that necessarily meant it was some of the greatest losses for the other in the same moment. Yeah. The 2009 Australian Open final.
Mm-hmm. And to actually feel, as the winner, to feel bad, to feel guilt, and feel like you wanted to console that person.
Because you have been in that exact spot with the same person before. Mm-hmm. Again, I know I've said it on this show a lot with respect to folks telling players when they shouldn't retire, that there's so much wrapped up in being a professional athlete at that level that we will never understand.
Right.
And this is something that bears that out, I feel. We had a window into what their relationship was, but we could never have known even half of it, of what it actually is.
Yeah.
And it's possible they didn't even know as well themselves. Mm-hmm. The enormity of this moment, the finality of it hits them so hard in that moment. And for Rafa, he knows that his retirement is not in the distant future.
Right.
And so, as he said, which I thought was one of the most touching parts of this whole thing, he said that going through this with Roger and having him leave, it feels like part of him is leaving as well. Mm-hmm. Like that was a lot.
Yes. And Roger's playing alongside players who say, I'm playing tennis because of you. Berrettini said this. Tsitsipas idolized Roger when he was a kid. It just must be a very strange experience. And I feel bad that he didn't get to go out in like an ATP tournament, or he didn't have that moment of glory.
Are you saying the Laver Cup is not an ATP tournament? How dare you?
I'm just saying he knows, and we know that he couldn't compete with full fitness, right?
Because
I wish that he had been able.
The natural end spot would have been Basel.
Yes.
When we learned that he wasn't going to be playing Basel, that's when we knew the fitness was just not there.
Right. I mean, we've said this many times, like, as much as players try, like, you cannot plan your retirement. You either disappear, like Pete Sampras after winning the US Open, or it may not be picturesque, right? It may be Steffi Graf losing at a California tournament and then stopping. It may be Chris Evert losing to Zina Garrison.
But you mythologize the best way to do it.
Right.
And folks always go the Sampras route.
And it was so unlikely that Sampras even won that US Open, right? Like, he was in the wilderness for a year or two.
But then we have Serena coming back from a year out at 40, going on 41, struggling in the lead-up tournaments, winning 2 matches, including beating the number 2 player in the world, and in that final game, giving a snapshot into her entire career in the span of a few points.
Yes.
That was incredible. There is merit to so many different ways of retiring. Mm-hmm. And I feel compelled to just sit here, eat my food, and watch it unfold and self-reflect at what I'm watching.
And there was some poetry for Roger to be able to retire alongside his greatest rival and now a great friend. And there were moments of brilliance, and that was enough, right? We got to see him on a tennis court one more time.
One of the other favorite moments for me at this event, and it really didn't start until Rafa got there. Because what was it, like 2 days? Everybody was there doing pictures.
The suits. I feel
doing
like
dinners.
They just brought the same suits out.
Walking the streets. Roger having to explain to Andy what the shard is. All these different promo events.
It's a reminder that Andy is
Scottish. Right? Doing all these promo events, and it's like, where's Rafa? Where's Rafa? A little bit of panic setting in. Is Rafa coming? And then Rafa is like, don't worry, guys. I'm going to be there tomorrow. I just had this thing to do with the king, La Majestad, and then all this other stuff.
Oh, is that how you say His Majesty?
Yeah. And it really goes into full force when Rafa shows up.
Yeah.
And you start to get the behind-the-scenes stuff, the Federer Insta Lives, where he shows up to practice, and he's filming the whole thing, and he walks by... He and Rafa are going to practice together, and he walks by Nadal's camp, which includes his family, his father, his sister, his mother, like the whole shebang. They're all there. The entire coaching staff. And he's walking through, and all of a sudden Roger says, La Familia!
It was cute. And yeah, there's clearly like so much respect between the families as well. To me, like, this is the value of Laver Cup. That's what I want to see. The matches don't really care. Like, I would... This is going to sound weird, but I would literally, like, rather watch the players backstage eating their dinner.
So you want to see ATP Big Brother?
The real world.
You want to see ATP Big Brother?
No, I don't watch Big Brother.
But Big Brother is like 24/7 stream.
Okay, but this, like, sitting at the table with the catering guy behind them and players sitting there and eating and seeing who's talking to each other. And,
I want to see them cooking for each other and sharing a meal that they've
Rafa's
cooked.
Pasta with gambas.
Pasta con gambas. The future of the Laver Cup going forward without those two performing, and when Djokovic goes as well, like, I don't know how... I just don't know what the value add is there.
I mean, if they're selling tickets and making money, like, it will continue. I'm all for making tennis more appealing to the youngsters, but why don't you invite young people into the fold? Like, you know, we have a lot of executives who are in their late 40s, 50s, and 60s telling us what young people want.
Right.
Why don't you ask young people what they want?
What is the average age of tennis executives? Stop telling me the average age of tennis viewers.
Girl,
Maybe we should change it from the top down.
What is the average gender? How about that? I know we can't average gender. It's silly to me. Like, I don't have the answer, but there are some simple answers. Make tennis accessible. Make people be able to turn on the TV or turn on their streaming service and know exactly where to find it. Make tournaments accessible.
And it's not enough to just sit here and bitch about pickleball. That is not the answer.
I don't care
That
about
is
this.
not the answer.
This war between pickleball and tennis, I find it very annoying. I'm just going to say that.
I think at this point, this is going to be a Federer / Laver Cup episode, strictly. And then we'll record shortly, very soon, a standalone mailbag episode that maybe just catches up on some of the results as well.
Yeah, because there's a lot of great questions here that I really want to answer.
So what we're going to do here, there's one last thing I want to talk about, and then we'll answer the couple mailbag questions we received that were specific to Laver Cup, and then we'll call it a show.
Okay.
I have here in the agenda Big 3 or Big 4 ? And then you wrote @Jonathan. Wow, you really want to go there?
Well, surprise me.
For me, it's in keeping with the title of this episode. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't even matter. It does not matter.
In the words of the great, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Mr. Federer.
Yes.
Answering this question, we fall victim to distilling everything down to slam titles. And if you look at Federer, 20, Djokovic, 21, Nadal, 22, Murray, what?
3.
3.
Right. In numbers, they're not in the same.
It seems like a ludicrous question.
Right.
When you consider Federer made 10 finals in a row, and then shortly after, 8 more in a row. We've lived through people like looking for a needle in a haystack, somebody to break through to win who is not one of these 4 people. The fact that Andy Murray existed in those conversations and now has a metal hip because of it is testament to his talent, his ability, and his role in this story. He lost a lot of finals. That doesn't make his achievements lesser than, to me. And also, it doesn't matter to me. When you say Big 4, I understand what you mean. I don't take it as, well, we need to relegate this to these specifically great people, as opposed to just signifying what you're talking about. Does that make sense? Like when you say Big 4, I know the totality of the era that I'm talking about.
Yes, that's where I wanted to land. The Big 4 describes a period more than anything.
Yes.
Right? Even more than 4 players. It describes the period in which, you know, Andy Murray had a winning record against Federer during Federer's dominant period. He won a lot of Masters titles. He reached a lot of Slam finals.
What of the 2016 season?
Always there.
The 2016 season. It may have been just one season.
Right.
But it was a hell of a season.
He lost heartbreakers to these guys. Like, this is what sets him apart from Stan Wawrinka, who also won 3 majors. Andy was always in the conversation. Big 3, Big 4, I think both terms are useful, but they're really, it's just for analysts, it's for statisticians and fans, but like, Andy is part of this story as much as anyone else.
The couple Laver Cup mailbag questions that we want to get into. Sea Salt and Rum asks, what exactly is Federer's legacy? What did he bring to the sport that no one brought before? Is there anyone on tour who now brings that? This is a loaded-ass question.
I feel that his legacy will take shape, like, as time goes on. I think maybe it's too soon for me, at least. There are so many cliches about Roger Federer. There was recently a story by, I think it was by Jonathan Liu, who talked about no athlete has ever inspired more bad writing than Roger Federer.
Oh, and you love to talk about David Foster Wallace.
Let me not speak ill of the dead. But I mean...
You hated it.
When I tell you I hated Roger Federer's religious experience, I hated it. But not... I mean, there's just been we talked about it a little bit. Just simplistic writing about Roger. And
it's lazy. It's lazy because it necessarily does not consider otherness.
Right, and it was probably like a Sachin Tendulkar level of idolatry, right?
Absolutely.
See, I dropped a cricket reference.
He's probably the most perfect non-tennis comparison that you could make.
So,
because nobody could convince me that Sachin Tendulkar's tiny little push, straight elbow, off drive for 4 was more beautiful than Brian Lara's whip off the hip for 4.
I knew we were going there. And I don't know what you're talking about. But where I was trying to go is that Roger, to me, like, he set the tone, right? Like, he kicked off this unbelievable era in tennis. And he made his opponents be greater. Without Roger, I don't know who Rafa and Novak would have been. Right? We don't know that. I'm not making any projections or anything. It's just impossible to understand the greatness that came after him without him. And I think that's his legacy.
It's unusual to have so many greats in succession, let alone playing in the same era.
It's unprecedented.
We're always left with questions of, well, what if Serena played against Steffi for more than a year and a half? What would Serena versus Martina look like?
Right.
Instead, we have this, well, what would happen if Novak, in his imperious phase, played at that level against Federer at his imperious phase? What if they were all imperious at the same time?
Right. What if they were all the same age? Like, would they have become the players they are? And like, it's cool to think about, but I think we have to give credit where it's due. So the legacy to me is, okay, essentially igniting this golden era of sports in a similar way that Tiger Woods forced the field to reach his level. Nobody was playing like him. The way that Serena Williams forced people like Justine and Kim and even her sister to raise their games to her level to even compete. And you see it in other sports too. That's part of his legacy. And I think the other part is like, wow, who looks like that on a tennis court? Who can do these things? Who can move like him? Who has that many weapons?
For me, part of his legacy as well, and it's the same for all tennis players, especially on the men's side, given the clout and the status and the stature of these men, they didn't do enough with their position to effect like actual change to a lot of things that concern us.
Yeah.
To Federer's credit, he was always incredibly engaging in press, but there was always a limit to where that would go. Do you know what I mean?
I think Roger and Rafa are moderates.
Yes.
Their personalities, like, they're not there to be revolutionaries.
Right. And I know folks will say there's no room for politics in sport, but if Roger Federer, if Rafael Nadal had said, listen, I'm not showing up to your little tournament unless you pay the women equally across the board, or I want to see you, ATP, take matters of domestic violence seriously. I mean,
yeah,
they were
largely
for multiple times over various periods on the ATP Council. There's so much that they could have done that they got to toe the line between reveling in their greatness and doing just enough. If we're being frank.
Yeah. And certain people, because of their subject position, are allowed to be apolitical and other people can't be.
Federer, who under no circumstance runs the risk of anybody doubting his sexuality because he has 2 sets of twins, could have worn a rainbow wristband at some point.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's so many things that I would have loved to have seen happen that weren't the sole responsibility of Federer or anybody else. But I've always wanted a top athlete to take the reins and run with these things. Mm-hmm. And I felt like they were in a position that they were untouchable. They were untouchable. The sport, I think one of the legacies of Roger Federer is that he was so much bigger than men's tennis. Men's tennis needed him at every turn. And he played the role. And he was happy to do it. But he didn't push the needle.
Right. I'm glad that he got the bag from Uniqlo, because he has made so much stinking money for so many people. He is like a god in some circles. So take that Uniqlo money. Be a billionaire.
And now that we've lost Rihanna to the Eat the Rich campaign.
Oh my god. Okay. What changed?
I don't know.
Rihanna has been asked before to do the Super Bowl halftime show, and she said, no, not with all this bullshit you're doing with Colin Kaepernick. Absolutely not. But she will be there next, whenever, January, February, whatever. And you know what? Probably watch it.
You know you will.
It's a cultural event. Rihanna hasn't even performed. Rihanna. She hasn't even performed in years. You
didn't think this was going to be just an unfettered, unmitigated praise fest for Federer, did you? Did you, listeners?
Certainly not how it started or ended. The other question that we wanted to acknowledge is from Dr. Mop, who's been around since like 2015. We talked a lot about what she asked. Fedal holding hands, tears, sudden Rafa departure, rise of Novak. We didn't mention that. This, cynically, was a PR coup for Novak. I think this did a lot for his image, if he cares. Because he was genuinely engaged. He was emotional about Roger's retirement. Nobody was talking about the vaccine bullshit. And he just got to be like a regular dude.
Who are these people who have such short memories?
Oh, I don't know.
Like, for me, it was like, I thought it was so ridiculous that folks were looking for him to be all salty on the sidelines.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Like, he's a human being. How could you not be moved by what was going on in front of you?
And also, even if he wasn't, he would have faked it. He's smart.
Also, it's just kind of unseemly and seedy to be looking at that angle in this moment, you know? Just let them all be.
Right, in my mind. Is really your theme throughout this episode.
And so I'm of the mind where I have not forgotten. I was like, yeah, girl, right? Have that moment.
Basically, you can go on for this week.
Exactly, you know?
But
time out.
We'll be back on your neck next week.
Have a little breeze out, you know? But back to regularly scheduled programming next week. It doesn't have to be that deep.
Right. Dr. Mop also mentions Riley Opelka's look on Tennis Channel. I personally did not see it. As someone pointed out to me that he was commentating, we don't have Tennis Channel here. So, I don't know, tell us how it was and what he looked like.
I saw a picture.
Of like the short suit?
I don't know what he was wearing, but I saw a picture of him.
He's an artiste.
Well, he takes up a lot of the camera lens because there's a lot of him. It's just a lot to look at.
Do you remember that Beyonce lyric? That shit was so good. I think I'm going to buy him a short set. That's from B-Day.
We have so many other great questions, and we're going to solicit more questions for you. And I think we're in a moment now where we want levity. So we're gonna have a mailbag episode next, and we're gonna try and be easy breezy with it. Mm-hmm. Maybe bring you a few laughs.
Hopefully there were occasional laughs on this episode.
Or laughs.
Okay.
Something. Levity, as Miss Carey
Brings
would say.
that levity.
If you are in the market for the Body Serve merchandise, you can get 30% off everything in the Body Serve store at Redbubble from now, which is September 26th, until September 28th. So it's a 3-day sale. It so happens to coincide with the release of an episode, which is great timing for us because we have no control over when these sales happen. And this is probably the best sale that there will be. I don't think I've seen more than 30% off from Redbubble. It's usually 20, maybe 25, but now it's 30% off. So get your bucket hats, get your dog mats, your dog blankets, all that good stuff. I think somebody for the first time today bought a TBS hardcover notebook, which I personally have had my eye on for a long time, and you didn't even know that we sold.
I didn't even know that existed. But thank you so much for buying one.
I guess I should tell you what the promo code is. The promo code is CHANGEITUP30. Change it up 30. Do I need to spell it out?
I don't think so.
Okay. And so you can go to linktree.com/thebodyserve. There'll be the link to Redbubble there. And then you use promo code CHANGEITUP30 to get your swag. I'm Jonathan. You can find me on Twitter at tennis_John.
I'm James at ElliotJMR.
2 L's, 2 T's. We hope that you have been sufficiently nourished by this Federer retrospective. We are not experts on Roger Federer. We hope that we were able to talk about it in a way that you would have expected us to talk about it. And folks who are disappointed, I guarantee you there are scores of other tennis podcasts who can heap the praise that you want on Federer that we were not able to provide. Is that too tongue-in-cheek?
No, it's correct.
Okay.
You just will not get lies here.
Thanks for listening.
Till next time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.